In this part of the workshop, we are going to have the roundtable discussion and the mostly socioeconomic aspects. And for that, we are going to start with a presentation by Dr. Hamid Quddusi, who is joining us on the WebEx from Vienna. Hamid is an assistant professor of finance at the School of Business at Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey. He's now traveling in Vienna, so he's joining us on WebEx. He is going to give his presentation on Urmia lake restoration, some economic insights, and then we'll open up the panel for discussion with Hamid and Hamid, please.
Thank you, Anja. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so delighted to be part of the event and so happy to see old friends all around the table. Hamid didn't mention that I'm also originally from Urmia. I grew up in the same city and I spent my childhood enjoying the swimming in the lake. So I have sort of a personal connection with the lake. I even spent my first year of life in a small village looking over the river of the lake. So I'm very much personally connected to the issue and so passion for helping the restoration of the lake. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly offer a few insights, mostly from economics perspective. And I'm sure I won't have time to go into the details. I'm just going to highlight the few outlines, and then during the Q&A session, probably we can open up first. There's an interest for further details of the topic. So if I can, all right. So let me position my discussion, because throughout the discussions yesterday and also today, we heard a lot about the complicated systems. And the way I see the economic modeling discussion within the framework of the complex system is the following, that we usually start with a very complex system, which to some extent is a seemingly complex phenomena because we don't know enough about its different dimensions. And I believe if we apply proper modeling approaches, we can reduce the complexity by better understanding agents' behavior, bringing it back to the framing of the problem, and arriving in a less complex or hopefully a complicated problem that we can tackle with more standard methods. So what I'm going to do over the next couple of minutes is trying to offer a couple of issues that may help us frame problem a bit differently using economic insights. And the tools I'm going to use is a standard toolbox of an economist. I'm just quickly going over Econ 101 principles that probably will be used during my talk. So first, we believe in trade-offs. We believe that the resources are limited. So every action basically means not taking another action, and there's an opportunity cost for that. So we have to think about trade-offs. The second, we strongly believe that people respond to incentives. People's behavior is not chaotic. They behave according to certain behavioral rules. The third one is that relative prices are important because they send signals consumers and investors. And the fourth one is that institutions and property rights matters. So my discussion will be based on theoretical pillars of those four principles. And the way I see it within the dialogue of a complex problem is that we start with some economic analysis, we feed it into the discussion and the decision-making process. We probably will face with new questions that should come back for further analysis. And the cycle runs over and over until we reach a consensus after making a thorough dialogue and discussion of the topic. So let me go and offer. So we are talking about ecosystem restoration. In this particular case, Urmia lake restoration. And restoration, from my view, is basically, it consists of two major actions. First of all, it's reallocation of resources. We are going to take resources from certain sectors, which in this case would include agriculture, would include some public funds, which can be used for other purposes, for health and education and others. And we're bringing them to restore the lakes. So we need to think of the cost-benefit analysis framework to make sure that what we are doing indeed worth following the path. And the second dimension of it is the redistributional impact. By any intervention within the basin of the lake, we are going to have some winners and some losers. The winners might be the local community, the owners of the recreational facilities, etc. The losers might be part of the farmers who have to pay extra charge for the irrigation water. So we have to identify these two dimensions, the cost-benefit dimension and the winners-losers analysis, or the political economy of the situation. And at the very, very high level, abstract level, I see the restoration problem, in particular for this lake, as an optimal control problem with the free terminal points. And I emphasize on the free terminal point, and I elaborate in a few minutes what do I mean by that. So we start with an initial condition, which is very undesirable. We all know, we agree that that's not the situation that it should be. But what I'm not sure is what should the new steady state be? And what I mean the size of the lake after the restoration when we reach the end of this project. Basically, the question is, what is the optimal size of the restored lake? Should we restore it to its original maximum size? Should we restore it to half a size? That's a question that I try to read reports and analysis that exist. I found less of answer to this particular question. But what's the curve of values for every extra meter of restored lake? That's the starting point that, as an economist, I want to see. I want to see what is the value of a saline lake, in this particular case, Urmia Lake. And when I'm thinking of the value of a saline lake, I can think of multiple components, constitutes, but just as an example, without going into the details, I can think of 4 major dimensions of the value for a saline lake. The hedonic dimension, which is the pleasure of landscape and the cultural heritage around the lake. The productive one, which in this case would be salt production and Artemia production. The ecological or ecosystem perspective, which is the preservation of biodiversity and also the prevention of salt storms. And finally, the recreational values, the ecotourism, swimming value, health tourism, and so on and so forth. So first thing I want to see is, how do we value the lake? What is the approximate estimated value of the restored lake under different size regimes? And as you see from this graph, some of these components are size dependent, meaning that if we restore it with a larger size, the value of these components would be larger. Some of them might be size independent. For instance, if you're talking about recreational or swimming value, maybe a lake which is restored to its half size still provides more or less the same value to visitors. So we need to have this schedule of the value of the lake. At the same time, we need to know the value of the alternative uses of unrestored lakes. So if we just decide not to restore the lake, what's the outside option? With the current situation, how much value we can get? We can mine the salt, we can start new ecotourism probably in the region, etc. So the value of the restored lake would be the difference between these two values. And I think it's important to have at least some rough numbers on the total value before we start talking about the full restoration. And a cost-benefit analysis is lacking the other pillar if we don't talk about the cost schedule. So the other thing I want to see is the cost curve of restoring the lakes. So using the standard graph, I emphasize the value of having a supply curve of water, saying that if we plot a graph which shows the quantity of water from different sources which are rerouted and injected into the lake, what's the marginal cost of each of these options, and what's the quantity, the volume that we can bring in. Usually in these efforts, we usually start with certain activities, usually low-hanging efficiency measures, which usually have a negative marginal value. It means that it pays for itself. Once you run the efficiency measures, it not only helps the lake, but also saves money in other aspects. But as soon as you pass that initial positive sum region of the curve, you start moving to other components which entail some cost. So we need to know that if we start doing structural engineering, or if we want to pursue agricultural reform, transfer it from other basins, or even use more innovative climate engineering, what is the value of water from each of these sources? Then I can put together the supply curve of water next to the valuation schedule, and then we can talk about basically what is the optimal terminal point for the lake, and what is the optimal path of restoration. And by the optimal path of restoration, I mean the speed of adjustment. Should we restore it in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, and 100 years? So these are different regimes of restoration, and each comes with different costs because the speed of adjustment would be different. And when we are talking about the valuation of the lake, there are also challenges with the valuation. I understand that. because the consequences of the current situation and the restored case would be distributed over large temporal and spatial scales. We don't know the geographical boundary of the effects, and we don't know over how many years the effects will show themselves. But that's a challenge that I endorse and I appreciated from the beginning. We are facing the issue of lack of sufficient knowledge about what would happen if we leave the lake at the current situation because of known phenomena in ecosystem valuation, things like tipping points, unknown consequences, or even option value of preserving a lake and turning into another use in future. So because of these, we usually adjust the estimated value of the previous graph with an additional value to correct for the ambiguity that we face when we're talking about the complex system like a lake. Once we come up with the estimation of the value, we need to also, as the next step, map this value to each of the lake stakeholders. So the value doesn't go one by one to each of the stakeholders. If you look at like a range of different continuum of stakeholders, starting from local community to going down to international institutions and global environmentally concerned citizens, you can see that the direct impact is going to be weakened as we move down the list. So the value is not the same. For someone who is living very close to the lake, the value is different than an Iranian citizen who visits the lake maybe every couple of years. So we have to come up with a table. What's the value of lake after restoration for each of these stakeholders? Then we can talk about their willingness to help us rescue the lake. I think that this was the discussion we had yesterday. Dr. Zarghami, I guess, made the good point that the question of are you willing to save the lake is not the right one. We should ask how much are you willing to contribute to save it, and this contribution comes first from the valuation. If we can know the contingent valuation of lake for each of the stakeholders, then we can come back and back up it with the value that they are offering and think of the financial ways to the investment. So that's the first set of information I think that we need to have, and I think we don't have it yet. So it would be great to get this overview, macro valuation reports produced by the Preservation Council of the Lake. The second set of information I'm going to provide is some background information on the basin's economy. So I started reading a little bit about the situation, and I wanted to make sense of the problem for myself. So I wanted to see about which context are we talking about. Are we talking about provinces which are very poor compared to the national averages, or provinces which are doing relatively well compared to the rest of the country? So I collected as much as the data availability permitted me. I collected a couple of key indicators, and I'm including here East Azerbaijan and West Azerbaijan. Kurdistan is also part of the basin, but it's smaller shares, so I'm focusing on these two key provinces. So in terms of unemployment rate, as you can see, both provinces are doing better than national average. So we are not facing a severe employment crisis in these two provinces. However, this relatively well performance of the employment market comes thanks to the large contribution of the agriculture sector of the region. So if you look at the share of the agriculture in the regional GDP of the two provinces, you can see for West Azerbaijan, it's 20%, almost 20%, which is almost twice of the national average. West Azerbaijan is not an industrial region. It's mainly working based on services and agriculture. East Azerbaijan is different. East Azerbaijan is one of the most industrial regions of the country. There are large manufacturing companies there. That's why the share of the agriculture in GDP and labor force is smaller compared to West Azerbaijan. Going down to share of the agriculture and local employment, again, you see that in West Azerbaijan, 30% of the people are working in the agriculture sector. National average is 20%, very similar to what we have in East Azerbaijan. In terms of rural household income, you can see that the West Azerbaijan's rural household income is significantly larger than the national average. Again, similar to previous indexes, the East Azerbaijan is pretty much the same as the national one. In terms of the urban households, though, the picture is different. East Azerbaijan is overall a wealthier province, but the rural population in the west part are wealthier than the east part. This is probably, I'm guessing, because of the successful agriculture practice around the basin of the lake. Looking into more specifically to agricultural activities of the basin, I kept hearing the discussion of including farmers in the discussion and using the social ties and local community solutions. Let's first look at the numbers. We are talking about 500,000 farmers in the region. The approximate number is 500,000. So we're not talking about a small village of a couple of hundred households. We're talking about 500,000 households with a population of approximately 2.5 million, because the size of the family in this region is around 4.6. The average farmer income is $13,000 US. And compared to the minimum wage of the country, which is $3,000 US, you could see that the farmers in the basin are doing pretty well. And if you compare this $13,000 US average farmer income with my previous number, which is the average rural income, you could see that it's almost 3 times of the average rural income, because the rural income includes all the rural population, those who do cattling and labor supply. This is only the farmers of the basin who use this irrigation water for producing agricultural products. And the cultivation area is also 4,600 hectares, going up from 335 in 4 decades ago. So here comes a very critical question, that with these prospect numbers, can we easily convince farmers to switch to an alternative plan? I heard yesterday that the CAVA was saying these farmers are not subsistence farmers. Exactly, they are not subsistence farmers. They are wealthy farmers. They are doing pretty well. And when you're talking about large stakes of 4 times of the minimum wage of the country in the rural region, which has a lower living cost, convincing 500,000 people to switch to an alternative way of living, I don't think it's an easy project. We should keep it as one of the big challenges ahead of the restoration. Then I went into the micro pattern of the agriculture. I think by now everybody knows that part of the problem is probably due to a switch from wheat farming and grape farming to apples, and which resulted in larger water footprint of the agriculture sector. So again, I wanted to make sense of the details of this process. So I collected numbers on the water footprint, the yield, and the price of these 3 major crops. So wheat and grape used to be the traditional crops cultivated in the region, and the apple was introduced late 70s, and it revolutionized the rural economy of the region. So let's look at the numbers. In terms of water footprint, the cubic meter per ton, wheat takes 1.8 thousand, grape takes 2.4, apple takes 800. So apple is actually a much more efficient crop compared to the other 2. In terms of yield, the yield of apple is 40 compared to the other 2. So the farmer gets probably 3 times more than grape and more than 6 times more than what they could get with from the wheat. In terms of price, these 3 are the same. So what we can see is that by switching to apple, the income of the farmers can go up with a factor of 6, 7 to 3 times compared to the older pattern. And when you calculate the water footprint per calorie, apple comes actually as a very, very good choice. So the question would be, should we really abandon apple farming? Because with the economy of the water footprint, apple is actually not a bad choice. Then in terms of the strategies to convince farmers of apples to switch to alternative, there are 4 major alternatives proposed. The higher efficiency scheme, which is trying to increase the efficiency of the irrigation. The problem with the efficiency is the well-known rebound effect, which says that once you increase the efficiency of the water, the farmers will expand the cultivated area through major channels. They may increase the area itself. They may change the plantation pattern from rainfall to irrigation. They may change the crop choice, and they may do double or multiple cropping. How we can address this? There are multiple strategies to deal with that. One would be to enforce the land level constraints, saying that no new area can be cultivated, so we have to limit it. The second would be the crop level constraint, not allowing people to start cultivating the water-intense crops. The aggregate water use schemes and water pricing schemes. Let me more quickly move to those. The second initiative proposes the land conversion, which asks farmers to stop cultivating. I think this is a very problematic solution. because it depends heavily on government commitment to continue paying this no cultivation fees. And with the history of the government, I don't think people would believe that this solution will continue for a long time. The third one is the water use management. So right now we have a de facto prior appropriation water right that the farmers believe that they have the right to have free water. We're going to transform it from a free one to a priced one or a capped one. And a prerequisite for this is being able to monitor the water extraction. And I read a little bit about the existing monitoring technologies. I learned that the engineering sector in Iran has developed several solutions for precise monitoring of extraction from different wells. So instead, we have made a big progress on that. The details of the proposal consist of multiple schemes. One is a cap and trade scheme, which was proposed, that you give a maximum extraction capacity to the region and then let the farmers trade their quotas. The other one is a crop-based water tax. You tax farmers based on the water intensity of their crops. So you don't tax the intake of the water, you tax them based on what they produce. The third one is a revenue recycling scheme, saying that we will link the payment to local farmers by the level of the lake. As the lake level goes up, we adjust the payment to farmers so that we internalize the positive externality of saving water in the agriculture sector to the farmers. And the fourth one is the water tenure reforms, to attach a particular right to water to the land the farmers own. And the fourth one is the crop change. I'm skeptical about this because I don't know where we can go from apple, because apple, as I said, has a very good water footprint and it produces a relatively good economic outcomes for the farmers. I don't know what would be other alternatives which can cover the large, vast area of the basins of the Urmia Lake and still has a better water footprint and provides sustainable economic incentives for farmers to join. So to conclude, I think I was thinking of what are the requirements for implementation. I think one thing we are missing are this microfunded agriculture and water models. I was trying to simulate the reaction of farmers to changes in the water rights. I realized that we don't have these models in Iran. These are the models which simulate basically the crop choice decisions of farmers based on different parameters, and they come up with a prediction of what would they choose given the new water price, new tax credits, input prices, labor, etc. I think we have to develop one for the Urmia Basin to be able to run scenarios and basically see the reaction of the farmers. The second thing we need to be concerned is the financial engineering solutions, where we are going to get money for all these projects we are talking about. So I made a short taxonomy. I think I won't have time to go through all of them, but I think we need to use a combination of public and private partnerships, tax-exempt Urmia Lake restoration bonds, international donors, etc., so we can discuss it later during the panel. And finally, I'm concerned with the political economy of the restoration. So the project is a long-term project. We are talking about 10 to 15 years of restoration efforts, and these long-term projects are usually subject to political cycles. We know that the politicians change their behavior as they get close to the election, and then they start changing, walking away from their promises. The second threat is similar to what we have with the climate change discussion, that the physical outcome would be visible. People would see the level of the lake, but the economic impact would be very intangible and hard to measure. People may start questioning the spending of a vast amount of money to restore the lake. So that could be another challenge. After a couple of years, they may give up continuing it. The project is going to create a large amount of rent seeking and market distortions because you're going to move the business and livelihood of people. They're going to change the value of land, properties, etc., close to the river. And still we have the problem of common pool with the underground water, which needs to be considered. So to conclude, sorry, I think I went a bit above the time. So we need to talk about the optimal size of the restored lake. Without having the schedule of the optimal size, I think the discussion is incomplete. We have 4 options for agricultural irrigation reforms, but they have their own challenges that we'll talk further. We need a modeling tool to be able to predict farmers' reaction. We need to open a dialogue about the financial engineering solutions and be concerned about the political economy of the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamid, for your great and very informative presentation. I would say it was very comprehensive and at the same time concise. So at this time, we will open the floor for panel discussion. Feel free to ask or comment on anything related either to the Hamid's presentation or in general about the socioeconomic aspects of the Urmia Lake Restoration Program. So I see Professor Bish Sanyal raising hand to ask a question. Professor Sanyal, please.
Okay, Hamid, I will repeat the question. In your very beginning of the presentation, where you showed a slide which you identified on the left-hand side, the deep uncertainty and unknowns about the problem. And then you had an arrow that says model, and then based on that, some answers. What struck me is how can you model if there is that level of uncertainty about the problem?
Okay, if you're talking about that one, so my point of view is part of the complexity is because of the lack of knowledge. Basically, it seems complex because we haven't tried enough to model and use standard behaviors, archetypes to sort of reduce the degree of complexity. So to me, if I can think about, let's say, the reaction of people in open pool problems, or if I can see the reaction of people to tax schemes, to credit schemes, to changing the price of water, to changing the price of crop, these are all models that, to me, reduces the degree of complexity from a mess to a predictable behavior. So I can take out that component and reduce, first of all, the number of chaotic behavior in the system, and second, have prediction on the part of the system. And that's the strategy I think we need to go. Instead of being completely passive about the complexity, we try to basically cut the complexity by bringing in people from different disciplines, ask them to offer analytical modeling ways to sort of reduce these dimensions of complexity and finally come up with something that we can manage.
Close to December now, so he called National Weather Service that, look, what is going on? What is the prediction? He said, no, I think it is almost certain that this year it will be very cold. He said, how do you know? Do you know all the Indians are collecting woods? So that is what it is. So they're collecting woods now. That is the way scientific prediction works. So how do you combine this local knowledge and scientific knowledge, and who is feeding back to whom is not clear? And that is essentially the problem of uncertainty. And this type of uncertainty we cannot resolve. So that brings us back to our reframing question. So this is a question that was raised in 1951 by a PhD student. Not a lot of you are PhD students here, so it's very encouraging. His name is Kenneth Arrow. Kenneth Arrow got Nobel Prize for his PhD thesis. And he wrote something called Arrow's impossibility theorem. I'll just read it because Amartya Sen did it in his Nobel Prize year. So this is what he said. I just want to just read it so that I don't make a mistake. Arrow had elegantly demonstrated that, short of dictatorship, social choice procedure could not always generate unambiguous and consistent outcome for a group of rational individuals who had their own preference ranking over collective outcomes that simultaneously meet a set of reasonable conditions. Very scientific, but what it actually means, when you have competing groups, agriculture user, urban user, farmers, if you give them rational choices, they cannot come to a solution that is consistent, universally true. So he's saying this is an impossible objective to achieve. That means in Urmia Lake, that problem simply cannot be solved by rational choices. So that means a complex problem. That complex problem can only be solved by the people who are interested in, by their own decisions, so they have to argue. So this is what in water diplomacy we are saying there. You have to bring in stakeholders and let them decide what is best for them. It is not win-win, it is not win-lose, it is what is best for them. They have to decide, then only you can get a solution. If that is the framing we use, then I go to Ilona Ostrom. She talks about 3 rules. And those are the 3 rules we need. What are the 3 rules? First rule is the constitutional rule, meaning that at a very high level, I should decide on certain things. In this case, I would say that yesterday we said that equity and sustainability, these are the two high-level rules. They have to be respected, irrespective of what we do. Second one that she talks about is called collective choice rules. Those groups in Urmia Lake have to come up with the collective choice rules. Third one is the operational rule. How actually that water will be used at an individual farmer level. Those are the operational rules. These three rules have to come in some type of synchrony. How would that happen? So the way it can happen that the people at the farmer level should be able to decide on their own rules based on their own benefit. If that mechanism can be created, then you have something useful. Otherwise, we'll go back and forth and get thoroughly confused. So what is beautiful about Ostom's Nobel Prize is that she's allowing these individual level people, operational rule to be dictated by the people who are affected by them. So it's not the Iranian government going to decide. Iranian government will decide at the equity and sustainability level. Farmers should decide really how they should use water, how much they should pay for it, whether they should be given incentive or not, that can be coupled. So what I argued, Lydia, and then basically encourage us to think really, how do I create those three levels of rules? One at a very high level, another at the collective choice tool level, which is maybe at the Urmia Lake level, another at the farmers level. If we can do this, perhaps we can reframe the question and start addressing it a little bit more effectively. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shafiq. Other comments that people would like to offer? So I see that this is a letter. Lead off.
Yeah, I want to address the first actually uncertainty that we faced about the scientific uncertainty that was also discussed yesterday about the model. That yes, the models cannot do a good job for seasonal forecast. Granted. And I mean, I will just refer to the quote by, I think, Fox that all the models are wrong, but some are useful. So I think we should just, yeah, and I do believe in that. But so we should ask the right. I am. I am, but that's why I have to be honest about it. But we should ask the right question from the models to get the right answer. If the question is, I want to know the amount of rainfall 10 years from now in January, this is the wrong question. Okay. At least as of now, the knowledge is not there. But if we ask I'm trying to frame like one example of a right question that we can ask from the model. If you're looking at the output of the GCM, the global climate model, that have been run for the whole 21st century, for different scenarios, okay, that we are all familiar with, different scenarios of the greenhouse gases, from the most extreme to the science fiction one that actually reduces the greenhouse gases. Then the models they generate their own weather and climate, and they have their own variability, and they can tell us that if under that scenario, there is a trend of reduction of precipitation or temperature or all the variables, if it is reducing or increasing. But they cannot tell us at like specific year of 2085, January, what's going to happen. But the trend is reliable because the boundary condition for the model is manipulated, is prescribed, that comes from the forces that some of them, the uncertainty is very little in it, such as the solar radiation, and some of it is just prescribed, such as the greenhouse gas, right? So we just impose that to the model, and we want to see the response. And if like over 20 models that Soroush was also talking about yesterday, they pretty much have a good agreement that there is a, let's say, decreasing trend of precipitation over Lake Urmia Basin, then we can kind of rely on that. At least that raises a flag. So we know that, okay, all the models agree on that. And if the temperature, which is there's more agreement on that. If the temperature increases, so these two together, they can imply that they are both favorable for reduction of the size of Lake Urmia. So I think that would be a right question or right expectation from the models, to look at the trend that they suggest and look at all the models and see the uncertainty within the models. If they suggest a projection with a small uncertainty and they have a good agreement, then we can rely on that result. If not, we will also acknowledge the uncertainty and say, okay, we don't agree, and we cannot rely on that. I thought that would be good to just comment on the ability of the models we are discussing.
Let's see if we could get to, we're looking for higher level findings from the workshop. You take it back and that colleagues, especially also going to be Shafiq talked yesterday about being purposefully pragmatic. And I'd like to suggest something from a slightly different standpoint, and that is from my experience as a government official implementing programs and how you integrate what happened today, because you have to go back and do things. And there's been a lot of very interesting discussion, some of which might be very helpful, some of which might be interesting and exciting, but are not doable within the framework of what your authorities are or what your reach is. And in one respect, I think it's helpful to consider reflecting on the narrative. And the narrative that we have had, for the most part, understandably, is a very pessimistic narrative. And I want to go back to what Shafiq said yesterday, glass is half empty, not half full, change the glass. How do you change the glass here? To some extent, you change the glass here by acknowledging what you have accomplished. And there's been very little discussion of what you have accomplished, except for statements said yesterday about, you know, you don't have to talk down to us. We're very smart people. We've done a lot of things. That's true. We heard this morning about a whole bunch of projects that are underway, divided into 4 categories, about areas that have been considered. And if you look at those projects, and then you look at the considerations, they somewhat mirror what we came up with. So all I'm suggesting is that you might want to look at what you have accomplished and take credit for that in a going forward basis, consistent with what we have suggested here.
I'm from Urmia, and my parents were generation by generation, they all not there, and I am very glad that I followed all the presentations yesterday in the live stream. I just wanted to say that the idea of educating the locals, especially the farmers and the rich in the Urmia and the region around the lake, is very, very important. And I think that they should be educated about this problem with very, very simple language, very, very simple language. It's not like they don't need to see the charts and stuff like that, very complicated way, in a very complicated way. But just now, during the break, I was talking to Dr. Jalili here, and I was saying, well, the rainfall is in Urmia, but she said that the dry out of the well cannot be just because of the raindrop and because of, the use of the underwater resources. So I would say that as a local, I didn't know that. So it's just the simple facts that are really, really simple, but the locals don't know about it that much, can be really helpful. And I have another comment, but it's a little more political than social. But I don't know, I can add later.
Okay, I think we've got some good more general. We'd like to, because I think we only have 1 hour remaining, to get some high level policy implications or research and policy implications. And I'm going to ask, if I can, for our Iranian guests to help us get focused on this, and we'll start with them.
Yes.
Actually, to ask you, what is the most important finding that you found from this discussion in the past 2 days that you think needs to be carried forward in future knowledge exchange? What might that be? And then we can ask what would be useful next steps for collaborative research. We'll start with.
Yes. And thank you so much, Jim, for your nice moderation, and we are so proud for that. My findings is that we should reduce the farming and agriculture, and also we should increase the irrigation efficiency. In our recent findings, which is based on a system dynamics model, to restore the lake, there is no solution rather than going to reduce the farming. And we should then educate the people, go to create new jobs, and then move the people to the new jobs and rather than agriculture. It is something against what Hamid said, but Hamid got to see. And as I believe the income of the people are not so high as he said, and also the apple also uses more water, and it's not good choice for future. I mean that we should reduce the number of the farmers, educate their children to find new jobs like services, as already done in the US. And also, another issue is that based on, we talk together, we need collaboration between the remaining farmers to create new annotation and improve the current farmers' entities. We say in Iran, تشکل‌های بهره برداران. We should increase their powers and ability to negotiate with the government. And to come back to the policy issues, we need neutral water diplomats in the region. Neutral water diplomats. By neutral, I mean that to be able to make trust among the stakeholders, to have the ability of facilitating the negotiations, and have a knowledge about the area. We cannot bring people from India or South Korea or US to negotiate the mediation. We should go to our university and train new young people to be water diplomats in that area. And also, they should have no personal interest in negotiations. And also to be patient, because sometimes I talk with our friends in the MIT and I say to them, do you want to come back to Iran? They say that no. I am asked why, and they say it's difficult to come to that area because there are some bureaucratic issues, and I say that this is a problem of developing countries, and you should come back to solve these issues. It is some part of the problem, and if you wish that if you reach the airport and somebody will come to give a key for you, this is your apartment, this is your car, you should forget about that. And then finally, regarding the policy issues, we need new generation of water diplomas with those characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you. And what type of knowledge exchange between researchers in Iran and researchers at Tufts or MIT would contribute to that end?
That's also a good question. Honestly, we are now in the face of the U.S. something like 1970, building dams and channels and something like that. But however, EPA and other environmental stewardship organization has worked in last 30 years at here, and we need the experience of them, how they incentivize people, how they educated the people. We should not go so high. The right under MIT, you see the station for the bikes, okay? That people, I know that you also use the bike to come here. But sometimes in Tabriz, I was using the bike to come to my office. A day, a student come to my office, said, okay, Dr. Zarghami, we love you, but however, it is possible to don't come with the bike because we are shying about that you come with the bike. Please come with your bicycle, with your car. And this is some cultural issues that we should think and work on that to change the culture. And
this is now about Mehdi's profile. And let's ask Dr. Mokhtar, you also, because if we have these statements of need and interest in knowledge exchange, this will really help us then focus on what.
I just want to, I feel bad that I just want talking too much, but I just want to focus our attention to something that happened, like with Leonard's comment, as well as I got several emails yesterday night from other people. I just want to share this so that it can focus our direction some way. And we had this conversation yesterday. I think when we are trying to do this, I think one thing is very important for us to see what Leonard, I think, very rightfully pointed out. We just cannot talk about negatives. I think we need to show the politicians that certain things have happened and these are good and it can be built on from there. So this is a good point I think to raise. Then Jeff sent me yesterday something that was quite powerful, and it was passed in Iranian parliament on June 29th. They are claiming, and I read it really from his email, is that we have used expert views of more than 500 academicians and 50 other experts, and 25 bills have been passed on June 29th in Iran. So that means things are already happening. We have to see really how we can plug in there. If we try to do something independently, it's not going to work. So that means they have already passed 25 bills, and they're going to save 1.7 billion cubic meter of water. I don't know how, because we could not even agree what the water balance is. So that means there are a lot of uncertainties there. Then David Sherman, he sent something, he said, although it was not clear, but his sense was that our Iranian friends know what the uncertainty is. They are not probably telling us fully. So what I would encourage you to tell us is, look, in your mind, where is the key source of uncertainty? We are talking about the Urmia Lake as a problem, farmers is a problem, but where are the key sources of uncertainty? If you can help us maybe articulate those on the board, then I think we have something that is useful. I think can build on from there. That's all.
thank you.
Yes.
About your question, I think the main thing for us is seeing the field areas of your country. This experiment is very useful for us, seeing their own lake or 4 lakes. I think we have to increase this type work. It was very useful for us. But about the other things Dr. Zarghami said, and I want to say about this, I think we have to change the direction from the agriculture to the industry and make more job opportunity for the farmers. I think this is the only way. And we have to use from useful methods for reducing water for agriculture. And I think there is no way for increasing or developing the agriculture. So already we developed a lot of agriculture. We have to, I think, reduce this type of work and we go to the industry direction.
These 2 points, the increased exchange of field visits and the more detailed case study analysis, as well as the agriculture industrial transition. Professor Marie, would you like to?
Actually, it is a bit hard to wrap up what I was in the meeting. I think I can separate, the discussion in 2 parts. Those that we have interact with farmers, and that part which relates to the government. In case of farmers, the main thing to have their contribution is to somehow explain what they will gain from such a collaboration. It is one of the main sources of uncertainty. And I think, not in case of Urmia, even in Great Salt Lake, that I saw it, we will have such a, ambiguity. I told you yesterday about the successful exchange in the basin, that, one of the satellite wetland was restored by the farmers. But they gained from it. It was not only because of serving to birds or bono fodder. They gained from it. So please consider that whatever we suggest should somehow can be sensible for farmers at what they will gain. Another issue is that when we are talking about a huge basin like Urmia with 52,000 square kilometers and as Mohammed mentioned, 500,000 farmers. It is really hard to organize such a huge people and huge community. I think what you refer to Professor Ostrom, she suggested to start with some small community and then extend it. And maybe this is one of the ways that we start with some small community and then extend our scope of work. But still, at this stage I have problem to tell you what can I tell to the farmers as a positive impact of restoration of Lake Urmia on their life. I told you, we can have some salty winds, we can have some dusted storms, but really these are not enough. They have to, so whatever you can suggest us that how we can increase income of farmers while they interact and come in and collaborate with the government, that can be very useful and helpful. And just remind you that there are 500,000 people. I think, in case of, government part, as also Amin mentioned, we are having, we have, I think, 3 official organizations that somehow are officially, manage and organize water, in Iran. Ministry of Energy, Agriculture, and to some extent, Environmental Department. And when you come to lower part, then MPs, member of, parliament, some local communities, they have an official impact of the management of the water resources. So if we can have some water government, if we can define a new, framework for the water governance and how we can, incorporate these into it. This can be very helpful. These are really, big issues, some social politics issues that I feel, can help us to restore this farm in the Lake Urmia. From engineering part, yesterday I mentioned how we have indicate impact of human activities and climate variability on the current status of the lake. I know there are some criticism about the result, and Surush were not very angry with that. But at least it was the first, quantified work, engineering work that tried to distinguish impact of these two, factors on influence. It can be helpful that if my friends, my colleagues in MIT can do the same work, and we can give them the data and really can have some feedback from your side that what is based on your methodology, what can be the role of anthropogenic and climate variables. Also, as Dr. Mohammad mentioned, there is a lack of information at the end of the irrigation station before the lake and what really reaches to the water body of the lake. We have lots of gap of data between the end of the station and water body. I think Dr. Hobby and his team can also helpful for this issue and to help us what really reach to the water body of the lake. Hamid suggested a very good economical model to indicate what is the optimum size of the lake. I showed you yesterday a work that we have done that if you reduce the lake or the area of the lake, how the economical services of the lake can change. I think this also is very good work that we can do with our colleagues here together and to work on it. Although I know there are lots of objection about reduction of the lake area. I'll take this opportunity, and I hope that I can arrange such a meeting in Iran. And as you also came here, we invite some of the people from here. I think if they be there and interact with farmers, then they can they can more realistically suggest the possible work that we can do to improve the status of the lake. I think I stop at this point.
This is just quite valuable. Now, I have lots of hands. I'd like to ask Mr. Tomron first, and then I'm going to go just what we call clockwise, which would be and we're also in the clockwise arrangement.
Skip an hour.
Offer your ideas on knowledge exchange priorities.
Besides on sustainable agricultural development, productivity efficiency in Urmia Lake is very below. In this area, for each cubic meter water consumption, only 0.2 kilogram product crop. In this time, important notice to water virtually and water footprint sense. Hello. Again. I say, beside unsustainable agricultural development, productivity efficiency in Urmia Lake is very below. In this area, for each cubic meter water consumption, only 0.2 kilogram product corrupt. Important in this time notice to water virtuality and water footprint sense. Urmia Lake has a huge crisis about water limitation, but this area each year export large amount water with crops that product low efficiency.
So water productivity and virtual water analysis involves the trade exchange data without. Thank you. Those are really good points.
Thank you. I have to thank you, Jim. I first of all apologize for not being here yesterday. I know that many of these issues were covered yesterday, so that's I could only come today. And I want to say, first of all, I'm very, very thankful and glad to see this delegation from Iran here. It's been our hope to build a very good relationship between the two countries, and the person who helped me is my doctoral student, Babak, through whom I'm beginning to just understand a little bit of Iran. So I have a long, long way to go to understand Iran. So having said that, let me just say my first reaction to this, hearing the presentation. One was that I think there are a number of factors that we think are plausible reasons that ultimately affect this outcome, but we are not totally sure exactly how they are linked or their intensity. And I think we should be humble enough to acknowledge that we don't know exactly how to explain the problem. We know the symptoms. And since we don't know how to exactly explain the problem, I think there should be experiments in terms of understanding the problem. And the 19 projects that Leonard Nelson mentioned, that all the efforts that you have made so far, I think evaluating from those efforts, evaluating in an interesting way, which one worked, which one didn't work, which one worked halfway, should be a research project. That's a very good, interesting evaluation. And evaluations, I would bring in the idea of organizations, not just the outcome of whether water level went up or down, but what kind of organizational setup led to better outcomes. And in this organizational setup, the local, which came up again and again, and which Eleanor Ostrom's work was mentioned, one of the assumptions of Eleanor Ostrom's was that local communities make their own rules. They don't need either state government or they don't need market, right? They make their own rules. Now, I think that we don't know if that's the case that's going to work in the case of Iran, that you can say it's just the local community. But I do think that the idea that we have to go and teach them how to be productive, how to be efficient, was exactly opposite of Ostrom's idea. Ostrom's idea was that they know because they live close by, they are very aware of what works, what doesn't work. Yes, they do make money out of the resources, but they also know how to collectively protect it. Right? So it's a very interesting idea about how do we include them and how do you learn from them and how they explain the problem because they just deal with it at local level. So I think that the issue of administrative arrangements in which the government, local government works with these groups, maybe with some central government support, what kind of arrangements I think are best, are most useful. I think these projects, these 19 efforts that we have on the ground, we could learn from them. And so I would put that as the highest part of the research agenda. One last thing I'll say about Hamid, because Hamid mentioned this thing about the trade-offs, and it's just for an argument. My impression is that the way neoclassical economists think, and I think Hamid falls in that same category of the argument, or there's efficiency, there's equity, we have to make trade-offs. My understanding from working in India, which is different, is that the way we think of trade-offs is not the only way the world can be operated. And it is not true that efficiency and equity always have to be traded off. Actually, innovative policies are often policies that transcend trade-offs. And that's why you are able to create political consensus instead of creating either or. And I think that again, if you start with that idea that there are trade-offs that have to be made, I think we already given half the story.
This speaks to Shafiq's points about value creation and so on as well. Ashok, you're next.
Thank you. It's connecting to Professor Sandel's trying to understand. Actually, as a peace and conflict researcher, I'm more interested what we are talking about whom. Who are the actors involved here? I think there is a lack of, we have been discussing 1.5 days. Few times the farmers are coming in a scale which is not properly understood, at least for me, because farmers are not exactly the farmers of similar type like we discussed yesterday. Who are the actors? Is this the farmers or the other people those who are in the navigation, the fishers community, or the other people those who are not farming? What's happening there? But more than that, and I think we haven't really talking about the regional dimension or the group dimensions there. That's because rather than just providing an economic cover for all these groups, I think there are two other significant groupings which we need to bring it to the discussions, and that might complicate the matter when we go for any kind of mediation. I will come back to mediations, but how that will really work. Who are these people, those who are the stakeholders, the real stakeholders? Because if there will be a change in the way we have been using that water in that area, there has to be a conflict. Of course, conflict is not necessarily bad, but how that conflict will be managed. Who are the actors we are going to deal with? And then coming back to this, because yesterday Shafiq was mentioning about mediation. Of course, I didn't do the homework. In Sweden, we don't get the homework, So, but the thing is, if you do the mediations, but what kind of mediation we are talking about? Because this is an internal issue, mostly an internal issue. But the internal actors, those who are involved, because also Mahdi was talking about the mediations, which will be like kind of people, those who are not, they don't have any stakes in it. But if you look at the mediation literatures, you have to be a successful mediator. There has to be also a strong interest involved, because otherwise we just provide a space. So what kind of mediation we are talking about, at what level? And because here, this is much more complicated because it's an internal issue. And whether it's a mediation or we are providing a facilities or what exactly needed. What needed and what sort of level in that kind of conflict management or a kind of post, how to post conflict if we bring out the literature of the peace building aspects. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to say a couple of different things. I hope that I can kind of bring all of them together at the end. But I wanted to begin with the question of scale that you talked about, and I think it's very interesting and very important to know at what scale we are discussing the problem. But would it not be necessary to keep in mind that it's really a problem at very different scales, and all of them need to be addressed, of course, but probably not by the same people. So it's true, and Dr. Madani yesterday mentioned that it's urgent. It's a technical problem. It's dying. It's dead in, 5 years if we don't pay attention to it. But isn't it true that in another sense, this lake problem is creating a window of opportunities, we can say, for people to talk about the environment?
now it's a crisis and it's immediate because we didn't do the things we had to do 30 years ago or 60 years ago. I mean, couldn't we kind of think of the problem as something long-term? It's short-term, the short-term issues are being addressed by people who need to address them, but why would we try to kind of eliminate that long-term aspect of it? When we talk about education, two local people talked about how education is important, and I have many examples within Iran that local people or people from Tehran went somewhere and without any government support or local support tried to change things, and they did it because they began to communicate with people, to begin relations, to, I mean, one very short example, the cheetah, Iranian cheetah, was being extinct a few years ago, and a couple of students from Tehran began talking to people in the areas that killed these animals. And now after 15 years, it's in all news, the government is supporting, people are taking care. So it's possible, and it's done in Iran. I mean, it's not like nothing can be done in Iran. So I think, especially I think it's also part of what scientists can do is that as they are addressing current issues, immediate issues, urgent issues, keep thinking about how our decisions today impact the future. I mean, if we are we have resource for doing specific issues. So if we have money and we have to put 99% of that money to save the lake today, can't we think of that one remaining % for education, for building relations that will be useful in long term? So I just think that it's also not about just the time, it's also about the scale of distance. So it's a local issue, that's right, but then you have a nation state that people sitting in Tehran maybe never visited the lake, still have feelings about it. They say we want to save it, even if they're not willing to pay the money for it, they think about it. And then in a larger scale, we are global citizens, there are environmentalists everywhere in the world, and they care about issues, whether it's in Iran or in India or in the United States. So I think while we are zooming in on the current issue, it's good to think about larger processes. And I think part of it is to define knowledge in a broader term. I think I mentioned this yesterday. I hope that you don't get bored, but it's not about everything that is measurable by a meter. It's also about understanding the relations and how different social groups might change over time. And I kind of, to conclude, I can say that it's really good to look at best things that are done. It's also good to look at worst experiences. So if you're looking at the international community, there are things that worked and there are things that didn't work. And I think it's really helpful to know about the disasters of ignoring, I don't know, the context and thinking about all these processes together.
Thanks very much. We're working around and tangible programs.
Yeah. I think one of the major outcomes of this workshop would be to establish collaborations for future. And I believe to facilitate that would be great if we could have more details about the 19 projects that we all were talking about. Of course, not today, but as a follow-up. And so with that, me and other folks here and to see how they can fit in within those projects. So that would be great if there is such a mechanism that you could get what has been done so far, what are the 19 projects, and the details about those projects, so we can see like for example, I can examine the sensitivity analysis on different projects, and other people can work on this.
That's a very concrete representation.
I don't want to interrupt the speaker, but I just to add that this was a start for thinking about Urmia Lake and making connection with the U.S. universities, especially MIT and Tufts. And we need eagerly your help in the future. And it was a start.
It's good. It's a good story.
So I think that everyone in this room believes that this is an interdisciplinary problem. The problem that hydrology takes for and hydrogeology, climatology, policymakers, and everyone. So the same thing is for the solution. We cannot have just one solution that solves everything. Each of us things kind of biased like our background. I'm biased in good way. So it's very relevant to what we studied and what we know, and all of these should be seen together and should be analyzed together so that we can find really the final solution. And I think that Lake Urmia was an opportunity for the water sector 10, 15 years ago to do a good study, but it has become a risk to the people of that region, the risk of the health, the risk of the job, and everything. So not only we have to understand the risk of the care and status of the lake, that it's drying, what is the risk of that? We have to understand the risk of our decision. That if we decide that, let's say, reduce the farming and then use the agricultural rate, tell the farmers go find a new job, I'm sure that's not going to work out. The government should really first build the job and then like present it to the farmer and say, okay, these are the other opportunities. So could you please like stop this use of like excess use of water and then move to the other sectors. So we have to really understand the risk of the care and status of the lake and our decision. And only by understanding that we can really understand the effect of our decision, the loss that it kind of exposed to the people who are kind of vulnerable to really that area. I mean, we're sitting here, we go out and the weather is nice, so we have a lot of water here. I come from California, it's drying. So when I see these ponds, and I just say the ponds of chemical water. But the thing is that people there are suffering, and they have to be really careful about the decision that they make. What the risk is that imposed to people as far as the job, health, and whatever.
Thank you very much. I have one comment. Today we are going to talk about socio-economic aspect of the Urmia Lake. But I have one comment about this issue. I think all of us agree with the local stakeholder participation in policy making and decision making. But I believe we should distinguish between two types of local stakeholder participation. The first one is that we as an engineer, and we make a policy and we make a decision in a closed room. And after that, we are going to educate local people. Please follow us. This is the first type of the local participation. But the second type is that no, we agree the local stakeholders to be involved in politics. I think when I checked, for instance, the 19th plan for restoration of the Urmia Lake, sometimes I think that the local stakeholder participation in this plan is that we made the policy, we made the decision as an engineer, as a specialist. Then we are going to train and educate local people. Please follow us. I think we cannot say that it's a local stakeholder participation. It's one way. What we need to recognize that we cannot restore and we cannot save the Urmia Lake without local stakeholder participation. But we need to educate them. We agree with the education in the basin. But we should believe, we should recognize, we should acknowledge that local stakeholder participation is completely different. You can see in the basin. Thank you.
1, 2, 3.
All the comments I'm hearing here is kind of like optimistic views about these issues. What I have is unfortunately a little bit of pessimistic idea. What I'm thinking is that as long as we are having like two parties putting two different factors on the table as a culprits of the issue, on one side we are always blaming kind of farmers and mainly the climate changes, and the other side is mainly kind of ignoring these cases and saying that water policies are an issue. We are not yet coming to the same conclusion. So for me, for me, the more important part is that like a take-home message is that I'm more positive and oriented after today. So what I'm mainly concerned is that instead of focusing actually on solutions, let's find what the question is in the first place. I totally trust and respect the scientists, but what I'm mentioning here is that we really need to have a handful of factors that both parties agree upon, and then based on that, we build up our solution. So it seems that I am actually not selecting really what the problem is in the first place, and then the solutions they are putting on the table, like we can educate people changing from agriculture to some other issues. It's a big thing, and yet we have a high rate of unemployment in my country, and I believe that that is not be a I guess near future solution for that. So for me, it's kind of apples and oranges at the moment. So I
want to clarify something. By education, I didn't mean university education.
No, I was talking about this point mainly made. So for instance, I just make a very quick example. In Iran now, agriculture is becoming more serious for those rich people who want just to have some idea of like having their hand dirty, gardening and stuff like that. And even if you find for those people like the real agriculture or other jobs to do, then they will be back to their roots to have those agriculture. And as long as they are not educated, they are going to do what anyway. You know. So for me, the real thing that I would very much like to take as home, like a take-home message, that would be much more fruitful if you know in the first place what the problem is, than trying to give a solution where both parties do not really agree on what the problem and the sources of the problems are.
Thanks very much. Our Urmia colleague.
I wanted to comment on Dr. Shafiq's comments. And, and actually, here I think another opinion about how to reward the farmers who are gonna, lose their, some of their crops because of the lack of the water. Again, I can talk about my family, my experience. 6 to 7 years ago, actually, the vineyard that my family owns is next to a little village, and the people who are in the village, they own, they live actually 4 seasons in their vineyard and orchard. But my family go to the vineyard just during the summer. And during the last 6 years, there was a lot of improvement in the area. For example, the roads are now paved, which was new thing. I don't remember. I remember that when I was a kid, the roads were just bumpy, and it was just very rural ways, and we had to cover our faces when we were going by car, driving by car to the vineyard. So now they are paved. There was no electricity 6 years ago in that region, and we basically were using these little lamps, like oil lamps. So nowadays there's electricity. People can take their TVs to their vineyards and their villas, and actually village, the rural people and population also are getting these advantages. Also, I heard from my mom this year that the locals can go and register for cell phone lines. So, and it is cheaper than regular cell phone lines. So I was thinking that these are kind of improvements, technological improvements, let's say, or urban improvements in the area. What if we use these kind of technological improvements as a reward to farmers who can contribute in the water policy? What is the reward in that?
It's a very imaginative idea. And then we shift to your other Urmian colleague.
Yes. So I think I mentioned some of my points yesterday. But today I have two suggestions for the collaboration and scientific collaboration. I don't really want to do that regularly, but today for positive day. I think one of the collaboration data or collaboration that one events can have is that we don't have that much experiences in making decisions. There is the tactical comes from bottom to up. We don't have that much experience, and whenever we try it, we kind of fail. So now we are facing again this problem. Now it's about farmers, it's about their unions, and it's about asking them what are their needs. And I think we should learn from developed countries that how we should deal with it. This is the major issue. Because we are always making decisions at the top. People don't really get into our equations of decision making, and I think this is one of the issues. The other thing is that, like all of the other governments, the government of Iran is not exceptional. The resources are limited, so government can't do all these stuff. They should empower NGOs or I don't know, any associations which can link government to local people. Somehow we should fill this gap because now it's empty between government and those very individuals. There is nothing. So I think now there is a problem. If you want, as an individual or group of people, to register your own NGO, you should go through all of the basic paths. It's very difficult to have your own NGO, and you are always under the observation if you have your NGO. So I think we should change this policy a little bit and let people tell about it. And I have examples of, for example, educating and trying to put women, rural women, to help their family, to support financially, helping them to make jobs for themselves and to help financially and support their family. And it's done by NGOs. The wetland issues, preserving wetlands are done by NGOs. And I think we can do it. We should change our view of how NGOs are working.
Thank you. There's such a large amount of research both on decision-making processes that have worked partially or not partially with us, and then also a lot of research on the efficacy of NGOs and that might be valuable. I'm coming forward, Professor Moladam. Did you have a question along the way?
Yes.
Since you're in the clockwise.
Okay. We have a lot of environmental problems rather than these things we talk here, such as treatment of wastewater and reuse of from it, contamination of water with landfills and pesticides, contamination water by nitrate and trace elements. I think we can have shared project about this environmental aspect and giving opportunity for students, especially MSc and PhD students, to have a sabbatical or short-term course or other things in your country, even in our countries, for seeing this aspect of environment. So this is my suggestion. We can do this type of thing with your universities. It's going to be a big problem in the future.
That's a great suggestion.
extensive country that Ramsar Convention was signed in 1931. I mean, Iran is a pioneer for international policy, international law, and to make international regulation for conservation and sustainable use of wet and water systems. They have a problem in pluralism, Shadigan, that other lakes in Fars province. But I think in Iran we don't have the problem of lack of expertise, and maybe the lack of information, meaningful and time series data is because of lack of technology. And we need a full and very active involvement of all parties in Iran, all experts from different disciplines in Iran. And also, if we want to have some international involvement and participation, such as the UNDP, as there is an ongoing participation at the moment, or WHO, UNEP, or other international organizations, we need to have, if we want to transfer all the technologies and information, we need to just localize all these technologies to Iran. And localization is the most important.
Thank you. I have three short comments about this post here. I guess I would argue against some of them. Of course, the first is this idea of educating people, which I find is very problematic. This perspective towards having participation, which is inherently a two-way street of mutual learning. This is more about learning, not educating local people. Sometimes this is us as practitioners, policymakers, or otherwise, that should be educated by those people. It's not that we should go there and educate people. The second argument is that, of course, information sharing is important, but education or educating people is something else. But the second issue is the idea of transferring from agricultural sector to industrial and or industrial agriculture, which is this transformation is transforming water from proximity to meaningful to the lake, which is not that much easy to be implemented, and this is not kind of right policy to get to industrial region and ask farmers to change what they are doing and not leave the way they need to go and do something else. And the third thing that I want to argue against is this idea of looking or searching for a best or worst practices all around the world, while we have a lot of things inside Iran on which we don't reflect and we don't evaluate them. We have this proverb in Iran, which is kind of related to water also, that says you are thirsty and you are looking for water all around the world, while you have this kind of water right beside you. I guess it is important to look and to see what the other people in other countries, what are they have done in the past, or what are the other experiences all around the world. But I guess more important than that is to evaluate what we have done in the past, specifically in terms of policy perspective for tackling the issue of Urmia.
Thank you very much for these provocations, Father. That is excellent. Shafiq, you're next.
So I'll go back to our original framing. So the idea of complexity really demands a difference. So let me see whether I can summarize my understanding of complexity. Complexity essentially tells you that you need to be humble. Humble meaning that I really do not have solution. Yesterday, what Surus was trying to emphasize, I think, is very picture. We are not really here to suggest solution. And let's be also humble that we are not the decision makers. We may think that we are helping at the most. The decision making will be done really in Iran and at different levels. So, but we do recognize that these are complex problems. So these complex problems will not have really generalized solutions. If it doesn't really, then it has adaptive solutions. This adaptive solution then has to be built on co-learning. I don't talk about educating who is educating whom. I need to be educated more about the lake really by the local people. I can tell them few things that I have learned from other places. So this is an idea of co-learning. What we could do really as a group is to create that process. Not that we are going to suggest solutions. We can can suggest that as a solution. So when we are saying that we will make some recommendation, what would be very useful, I think, if this group as a whole can suggest a process of this co-learning that can happen with some tangible outcome, not just learning, because learning is a very long cycle. It can be 50 years, 100 years. We are not interested in that. That is a long-term process. What can we do short-term? Like what Dina was saying, that what have we done so that we can show that there are certain good things happening? What can be done in next 2 to 3 years? What can be done in 5 to 10 years? Then we have something little bit more useful. Not that those are solvable, not that those are implementable, but at least the discussion can start. To do that, then what I would argue that we focus on those scales and levels. The scale meaning that, yes, I think I am with you, Jalal, is scale is no, we should not abandon long term for short term. The challenge is this dichotomy between short and long term is perfect. We know it. That basically what I do today will affect my life 10 years from now. But I am really not that basically foresighted. I cannot see the future, so I keep doing things locally. That will happen. One good example that I found really in climate change or global warming, I may say, but this is, it's not my view, but I will say, so it makes it very provocative, that I really don't have any interest in my grandchildren. I don't know really when they will be born. I want to really maximize my comfort. But you want me to basically not drive a Hummer because I like Hummer. And by creating Hummer, I am creating global warming. So what can be done? This is a conflict. If we talk about transgenerational equity, these are good abstract concepts but have no meaning. But one person got it very right. The way it was done is this. If, for example, reducing air pollution in Boston right now is affecting me, it will also affect the next generation. So that means if I can create certain things, those interventions can rightfully affect me, so that's my gain. At the same time, it also affects the future. Then only we have found something to link short term and long term. What we are looking for this basically, yesterday we talked about this. I'm still not convinced really that Urmia Lake has any value for many people. Yeah, it was a nice thing to do. I saw him and then I did this. What is the real benefit is not clear. If that is not even clear, how can we talk about basically putting value to that? So this is very problematic. Forget about short and long term. So that means we need to understand that. That's where I think this idea of custom will be very powerful. How do you connect then constitutional rules, collective choice rules, and operational rules? If you can do all these three together and create a process of that conversation that can go on, I think we've done something at least humble but effective.
Thank you, Shafiq. We have 3 more questions or comments, and then I think we've come to a good conclusion. So we're swinging back, and then it's going to swing back around this way. You're the last and clockwise.
I'm going to try to summarize what I have heard. I think what I have heard is that collectively we would like to keep up the discussion related to the reframing of the issues. And to this extent, I think we would like to maintain international collaborations around Lake Urmia, and maybe even including expertise from Lake Aral or the Aral Sea. Maybe we could also, to this extent, create a formal academic exchange between our institutions. That would be really nice. And then I heard that we would really like to continue to perform analysis related to economics, agriculture, institutions, stakeholder engagement, keeping scale in mind, and also perform a social network analysis, I think. That wasn't said directly, but I think it sort of came out. Pay special attention to connections between the different ROMs and adaptive solutions.
That's very well. Thank you very much for that summary.
And I can send that to you if you would like.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a PhD or PhD can be by medical imaging, so I cannot offer any technical insight directly. But similar, based on what I heard, I thought a short comment that might help the discussion was the first thing was I think the continuous engagement is a key, not only in this issue, in other academic issues, and certainly here as Iranian Studies at MIT, we would very much like to foster that collaboration and facilitate in the future as well. So my comment was, as a biomedical optics engineer, I think what could be very useful coming out of the discussion was even in a design problem, you define your functional requirements. What is the thing that you want to address? I think Hamid actually touched on this on one aspect of it, which was basically, okay, what is the size of the lake? It's a very basic question, right? I think another basically very important point mentioned by, I think, Dr. Imam, if I'm not mistaken, was the time scale of the problem. And I guess at least today, during the discussion, I didn't see any clear kind of definition, okay, in how long we're going to address this much or this much. Then actually that would really help to rule out many of the solutions actually being discussed here. For example, like I was mentioning, I also do not think you can basically industrialize that region or the areas around the lake in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. I just don't see that. If it hasn't happened in the last 70, 80, 100 years in Iran, I don't know how we have the infrastructure and the institution to make that transformation. So just wanted basically to emphasize the role of time scale when we think about the solutions.
What I heard was that you were emphasizing the role of the Iranian students in helping to kind of carry this forward.
Absolutely, actually, Iranian.
A great offer from the student organization.
MIT and MIT professors have been very kind in offering us help whenever we reach out to professors to basically finding similar such events. Actually, we should have mentioned one of the sponsors of the event is the Graduate Student Council at MIT. And we would be very happy, basically, to mediate and organize such events, either online, basically trips in the future, and facilitate.
Make advantage of this offer.
Thank you much.
And then Hamid Ghalisi.
Hi, thank you. I hope that you're hearing me. I just have a couple of quick comments. I think I heard one comment about my position on trade-off between equity and efficiency. I never made such a comment. I don't think it was part of my discussion. What I was trying to say, I wanted to reemphasize, is the trade-off between different sources of restoration and different benefits of scale of restoration. And we cannot forget this hard constraint. The water should come from certain places. Wherever you take this water...
Ahmed, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Hello? Ahmed, can you hear me? Yes. Should I... Did you guys hear me, or I should repeat it?
I can hear, but I'm not sure about the others.
Okay. Should I go on?
Comment before. No, continue.
Okay. What I was going to suggest, which was, I think, following what Puriya was saying, I think we need to come up with a taxonomy of a scale of different solutions. I heard very nice comments about educating people, about building social groups. These are all great. We know that they have worked well in small scale, community levels. But here our problem is a bit different. The problem is bringing close to 1 million cubic meter of water per year. And we have to see where are the 80% of the volume can come. If we can come up with this ABC categorization and associate a cost with each of them, then we can rule out certain infeasible solutions. For instance, Mehdi Zarghani, I guess, was telling that we should create the jobs. So I did a back of envelope calculation. We are talking about 500,000 farmers. Let's say that you want to cut employment for half of them. That's 250,000. Nice. The entire country didn't achieve creating 250,000 jobs during the last year. And during the last decade, we didn't manage to create more than 500,000 new jobs. So we have to sort of compare the scale of the solutions we are proposing with the entire capacity of the country. It's always nice to be creative and think out of the box, etc. But at the same time, I think the resource constraint gives us certain hard constraint that it's not easy to pass over. And my final comment, I think one of the issues that many people pointed out is this fragmented small-scale farming. That's a big barrier for multiple solutions. It's a big barrier for diffusion of the new water solutions. It creates the free riding problem. It creates the issue of the metering, and also it reduces the internalization of the effect of crisis on individual farmer. When you own just a small piece of land, you don't care about the regional effect. If you own hundreds of acres of land, then you would care because there would be a direct impact on your the ownership. One strategy would be to start activities to accumulate land tenure. I didn't say it's part of the solutions. The government can encourage large agricultural investment corporations to come negotiate with farmers and try to aggregate pieces of land. Once we reduce the number of 500,000 small-scale farmers, maybe to a couple of 10 large corporations, then it would be much easier to bring everybody around the table because they would have large scales in rescuing the lake, and also they would have enough resources to invest on new technologies. I think that's all I want to say. And thank you so much. It was a wonderful opportunity to be you with guys. Since I cannot say goodbye, I just finish here and I'll wish all the best for everybody.
Biology or ecology under the ground supports the plants and the growth of the plants. So that's just something I really haven't heard is considering the ecology as a stakeholder as well in the environment. Consider them as stakeholders. Thank you. Fatima?
Yeah, I just want to add that I absolutely agree that because it are the stakeholders of this river, lake basin, and who play huge role to obtain water from lake for input. And also, this is about what is the social impact, such as health hazards from that sector. As I know from Arashi waste, it's a really disaster for whole Central Asian region, and it goes far away. So it's impact on our health. I think more than a million people there, and I'm living far away from around, but these spaces all around. So we have to think about also about health issues for people who live around this place. I don't think so that only people who live in this place they're impacted. I think it's far away from all around. Impact from that one. And I think that the water quality framework is not only, but one of the tools or ways to bring all of stakeholders together on one table.
Thank you very much.
We finished. I just have some small comments. As I feel like my final advisors for policymakers and the people. For the policymakers, they should move from, I say, ribbon cutting solution to long-term, but not so visible solution. They should sacrifice their high precision people and go from ribbon cutting solution to more actionable solution. And from the people side, the people also should not wait for the government. The people also should start making small institution between them. That historically we have something like that. We have the mirab that you know about history of Iran. The people themselves organize water usage, and also regarding the religious issues, we have hayaks that people themselves collaborate and start some work. Then from the people side, they should not wait for the government and their policy. And then we should move from both sides to find actionable solutions. Thank you.
You mentioned the role of the mirab. especially the shape behind scroll and these traditions. Michael, you've done an extraordinary job here, and I was also a comment and a suggestion.
I would only repeat the suggestion that I made yesterday, and that is that somehow our engineering and scientific colleagues who've done an extraordinary job. I've learned an enormous amount about this particular region, and thank you for all of that. And I think that you all have expressed a need, a clear need that you can help with, that you can't do yourself, and that is to start training some people in organizational behavior, in social sciences, in the ethnography of how these people actually live on the ground, and to help people, to help the hayats, if you want to activate the hayats, or some of the traditional mechanisms, but also some of just the new mechanisms, getting university students involved in their own areas. We've got people here from Urmia, and so there must be people in Tehran from Urmia as well that can go back and help. But I think Iran has done itself great disservice by sort of decimating its social sciences, and that needs to be reconstructed somehow, and it needs to be done. It can't happen overnight, but you have a few good sociologists and anthropologists and so on that are there, and they need to be encouraged to actually do real empirical research, not just sit in the university and teach classes. So I think that component of it today was supposed to be about social and economic issues. We heard a very excellent presentation on economics and how to think economically, but we've actually not said very much about the social side of things at all.
We've had a good social process, so good social engagement among our stuff. Colin, I'd like to turn over to you to take the final word, your final kind of thoughts here as the host for today. If you would just say what you would like to in the way of a recommendation, suggestion that you have, having thought about this over the course of the past today.
I'm trying to make it simple. So first of all, I want to thank everybody, all the speakers, the panelists, the Irrigation faculty from Tufts University Chapter for the very first day suggestion to hold this workshop here. I mean, I was thinking, sitting here, when talking about how we can collaborate and make more connections about the MIT. So MIT has a program called MIT, which has connections with different countries. So we have MIT Brazil, we have MIT France, MIT Germany. These programs, specific for each country, have funding for both people traveling from either side to the other, both coming here and staying for research, or maybe spending the money on a research topic, and you basically, like any other research funding, you make a proposal, the review process, and you feedback, and so on. Maybe we can think of that and make a case for like Urmia and Iran as a kind of a long-lasting, I would say, program here. That's something to think of.
Building the foundations for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that we also said, I would say the Iranians would be really happy to help in this regard at MIT. So from the other side, definitely we will help from this right now. My concluding part of that.
Thanks very much. And I think that's
yeah, I have just two tactical. Yeah. So first of all, I want to make the thank by names. I mean, Shafik was important, Matthew, Ojan, and Bobak. Korea, about logistics, was really very much help from me. I want to thank the Iranian delegation for taking time coming here after your long trip to California with all of the overnight flights and the trying and the huge travel time we had there, and also making us informative. I mean, giving us information about the lake room and very nice presentation. And also wish you a very safe trip back home. I mean, again, I just want to invite you all for the lunch outside in the hallway. other than that, I mean, have a very good weekend and.
Mohammed, why don't you just take a picture?
Yeah, we don't have to for the very time. And very happy for the
I just want to say one thing really here. Thank you very much for reminding me about this.
Yeah, thank you.
But one thing I will say though, from that
I will definitely contact you maybe.
Give me 1 minute. Hello. So, now, one word to measure really that what we have done, there is a group really in international development, they came up with something called a significant change. So this is not about numbers, not about narratives. When you have a process like this, you may feel good that, yeah, we have spent 1 day at Tufts, 1 day at MIT, we had a lot of discussion, and we feel good. And 6 months from now, you have forgotten everything that has been discussed. So this is not a significant change. What I would urge us to do really, do something actionable, so that once we get out of here, at least do one thing that will have some impact 6 months or 12 months from now, whatever it is. We can do it individually, we can do it as a group. What I and Mahdi and Hojjat will probably do, we'll try to synthesize some of these things and try to write something up. And we did talk to Kaveh and Surut, and perhaps write 2 pages summary that can go to the newspaper or to even Iran, at least what we have discussed. After that, I think it is our own responsibility to do something that is actionable on our own part. So please keep that in mind.
The only thing is that with Michael's notes here, you'll actually have a basis for compiling the summary. And so that really everyone, most people contributed to those notes, and we really have a lot to work with in the way of this.
I just wanted to add that basically our group policy is actually we have generated reports in the past, and basically policy making and bridging the gap between academia and policy making is one of our basically constitutional roles. We will certainly push for that, and we will share the results with everybody here. I also want to thank our online participants.